Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for Extraction. So what Extraction is essentially about is we center on the character of Tyler Rake, and he is this mercenary that is really down on his luck and things like that, and one day he is recruited by this team to track down this kid that has been kidnapped, who's the son of this big drug lord, but he's been kidnapped by this drug lord for ransom and things like that. And so basically he has to extract the kid but also try to take down these people that are trying to come after him, and that's really all I'm going to say. So, Extraction overall, I didn't really have that much anticipation for this very much. It's a movie that, I heard that Joe and Anthony Russo were involved, but that didn't exactly inspire a ton of confidence, because even though I adore what they've done with Infinity War and Endgame and Winter Soldier and Civil War and things like that, aside from those films, I have yet to see anything else from the Russo brothers that is really worth talking about. I think they're great, definitely. I mean, the episodes they did for Community and things like that, that was really good too. But I have yet to see them do a film besides those four that is really worth talking about. I know they did 21 Bridges, but nobody really talked about that at all. I didn't even end up really seeing it, so I didn't really have that much anticipation, and the trailer didn't exactly inspire confidence, so I pretty much just expect this to be another very run-of-the-mill Netflix film, especially considering that this is the kind of films that they put out every so often. They put out these action films that really would come into theaters, but even without the quarantine, they just don't, because they belong on Netflix. And look, I will say this about Extraction. This is a far better made film than I really could have expected it to be, but I don't think it's necessarily a good film either. Look, there's a lot that works here, there's a lot that doesn't, but we're just getting to it right now. And I will say right now, one of the things that absolutely does work about this film, and something I think wouldn't really work without it, is the acting. For the most part, I think is really good, particularly from Chris Hemsworth, is fantastic in this movie. If there's anything that he has shown, post his work as Thor, even though he still is playing the Thor character, is that he can very much carry a film, and he very much does show that here. You really do believe him as this mercenary, but you also do believe him as a real person. He's not completely indestructible. He does get very bloodied and battered, and he gets exhausted, and he sweats a lot, and I thought that that was something that he did a very good job with. And when we get more into some of the more authentic moments with Rake's character, I thought that's something that Hemsworth also did a really good job with. You felt his pain throughout the movie, you felt his humanity, and he is without a doubt the best actor in this entire movie. I don't think this film would be nearly as good if it wasn't for Chris Hemsworth here, who I did think overall did a really solid job in this film. In terms of the rest of the cast, though, they didn't really stick out to me all that much. I will say, for what he has, I do think that the character of Rudhraksh Jaiswal, the kid actor in this movie, was actually pretty good. He definitely did have some moments that I thought were pretty effective. I thought that the bond between him and Chris Hemsworth was well done, and I thought overall his acting was pretty good here. Even the main, villain here, who played Priyanshu Painyuli, sorry if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, I thought he actually was pretty good here as well. I like Randeep Hooda. So again, the acting isn't really all that bad. It's just nobody really sticks out in the way that Hemsworth does. And then there's David Harbour, who is the other really big, well-known actor in this movie. And I will say this right now. There's a reason why you haven't really seen him in the trailers, because he's really not in this movie that much. This movie honestly kind of wastes him. And what he has, he's fine, but the movie does nothing with him, really, at all. Like, the movie does not service him very well. But what he has, he does an alright job with. But like I said, it really is Hemsworth who is the big standout here, and I don't think this film would be quite as good without him. Now let's get to the directing and the writing, because that's the other thing I think that actually does work very well with this film, is the directing here. The director of this film, Sam Hargrave, is actually a former stunt double. He has done films such as some of the X-Men films, films. He's done a bunch of the Avengers films. He actually has been the stand-in for Chris Hemsworth quite a few times before. So he's very experienced when it comes to this kind of film. He very well does know what he's doing. He even did the stunts for like Hunger Games and things like that. So again, he's very much experienced with this type of thing. So again, it's not that shocking that he does do a really good job directing this movie. And I do think that he does have a real future. The way that he directs this film, it feels very slick. It feels very real. The action and things like that definitely is very well directed in that way, and I think Hargrave did a very good job with that here. Definitely, he presents a very bleak and very brutal film, and I really do want to see him direct more movies, because I think his directing here is really good. It's definitely another one of the best things about this movie. I was very impressed by his directing here. The writing, though, this is where we get to my main issue with the film, is that, look, as much as I do want a film that is, has some really thrilling action sequences, which we will get into, I want a good story, and I don't want to say the story in this movie is bad. It's just very basic. It's a very basic, by-the-numbers story, and I feel like it could have been a lot more than that. Our main character, for example, Tyler Rake, from the moment you're introduced to him, you can tell that there's something going on. You can tell that there's something that went on in his past, and when it's revealed, it's definitely effective. It gets you to understand the character's motivations a little bit more, but I feel like we just didn't dive as deep into him as we could have. I think that definitely does hinder the film, and I think they would have actually benefited them to take some more time in diving into Rake's backstory. I think that definitely does hurt it. But that's not my main issue. My main issue is the kid he's trying to extract, Ovi, is not an interesting character at all. He really, and he really should be. He has massive potential. I mean, this kid is the son of this huge drug lord, this guy that everyone very much respects and things like that. He's like the biggest drug lord in India. And so you would think with that, there'd be massive potential to really dive into what it's like to be the son, the difficulties that he has in doing so, the way that he tries to be a normal kid under these circumstances. But there is no such storyline in this film, and that was very disappointing to me, because again, I saw chemistry between these two. There's a really good scene where Ovi is trying to help Rake kind of deal with some of what went down in his past, and I really thought that that would be the chance for him to also open up, but it never really happens in this movie. There isn't that scene where you see him really just confess what he's been dealing with, or we get something compelling to his character. It just isn't really there, and that definitely does bring the film down quite a bit. And again, I think that a lot of the characters here are very one-note. They spend a lot of time on the villain in this movie, and he's a good villain because he's intimidating, but he isn't necessarily that compelling. It's a lot of just, oh, this kid is the son of a drug lord, and I can get some money from that, and we have to try to take down Rake as much as we can, and they just don't do a very good job with that. There's another character in there whose name is Saju. Seems like he's maybe going to play a bigger role in this, and he really doesn't. It's almost like they didn't really know what to do with him, and so I would say that's my biggest issue with this film, is just the screenplay here by Joe Russo just really isn't that great. It's very flat, it's very one note, and I feel like it should be a lot better. I think that's what really does bring down this film. What strengthens it is absolutely the cinematography here, which is absolutely incredible in this movie. The cinematography in this film is a work of art. If you want to just talk about films purely based on action, this is absolutely the kind of film to gravitate towards. I really could see this being a film, in the future that people use as a point of reference for how to construct action scenes, because they go all out in this movie. They do not hold back. Every action scene in this film is incredibly brutal. It's incredibly realistic, and you really do feel every kick, every punch. It's very John Wick in that way. I know a lot of people have said that, but in the sense that John Wick makes you feel like you're right there, and every action scene is just so visceral in that way, and every action scene sticks out. That's very much the same with Extraction. There are so many just thrilling action scenes here. The one that everyone's talking about, the one take tracking shot here, is amazing, the way that they construct it. It's one of those things where you don't realize it's there until you realize the camera hasn't cut. The shot hasn't cut. The camera is still moving. It's just focusing on these different groups of people, and the way that it just keeps building and building and building. It's so impressive, and definitely one of the best that I've seen in quite a while. That scene alone, I think, is going to go down as maybe not a classic, but definitely a standout scene in terms of action from this decade for sure. I think it's going to be a scene that a lot of people are talking about, and that very much is something that I can praise in this film. And again, every action scene, they do not hold back. They're very bloody. There's tons of just Chris Hemsworth just shooting people and stabbing people, and they just do not hold back, and it's just amazing to watch, and I do think they did a very good job with that for sure. So all of the action scenes in this movie are very much worth the praise. I think the action in this is just absolutely relentless and thrilling, and it's just everything that I could possibly want. It's really just, I think the film focuses a little too much on the action. It felt like they had these really great action sequences, but they didn't know what else to do with the story because the action takes up so much of the film. And I think if it was a little bit more even-handed, where we had these amazing action set pieces, but we also had a really grounded story, then I'd be a little bit more kind to this film. But because of the fact that the action is so frequent, I actually do think it does hamper the film quite a bit. I think it does strengthen it as well because it helps the film be a little bit more memorable, but it also is a disservice because it takes away from the story, which I think should be a little bit more interesting than it is. The score here is definitely really good. It's very pulse-pounding. It definitely keeps you into it. It definitely does keep you on the edge of your seat, and I think they did a good job with it. The editing to this film as well, I will say, when there is not action going on, the film can get very boring. The whole sequence with David Harbour's character almost feels like it's stalling the movie. It's a time where we can, and at first it didn't seem that way. I thought that this was going to be a major shift for the character of Tyler Rake. You know, Harbour's character, he kind of lays out this idea for Rake's character, and you think it's going to go somewhere really interesting, but very quickly realize this guy is really just here so Chris Hemsworth can get into another action sequence and things like that. And it honestly felt like you could cut him out of the movie and nothing would really be lost at all. It really just kind of felt like a waste of his talents, which is unfortunate because I do think David Harbour is a really great actor, but this just did not utilize him well at all. I feel like if we would have spent a little bit more time on the characters, the film could have been paced a little bit better. When the film has action sequences going on, you're really into it. It flies by very quickly, but when there isn't action scenes, it can get a little boring. It actually did take me quite a while to get into this movie. I found myself honestly very uninterested in the first like 10 minutes or so. Once we got into the mission, I think the film got a lot more interesting, but the getting there was a little bit rough, and like I said, when they take a break from action, it's not nearly as interesting as it should be because the film is so focused on delivering the goods in terms of action, and I feel like that definitely is something that's important with a film like this. You want to have really great action sequences, but I also want a really grounded story, and that just wasn't there. So at the end of the day, while there is a lot to like about Extraction, Chris Hemsworth is very charismatic and very convincing in the role for sure. He very much proves that he can lead an action movie for sure. The action set pieces are just absolutely incredible here, especially that one take shot that I said everyone's going to be talking about, this car chase scene as well. It's just, oh, it's so good. It does have a story that does come across as pretty flat and pretty underwritten. I don't think it's a bad story necessarily, but it's one of those films that isn't trying to be anything more than it is, and I feel like it actually would have benefited more if it tried to add a bit more character development, if it had a little bit more going on story-wise. Then I think overall it would stand out even more than it does. It's definitely a standout in terms of action sequences, and it is a film I think a lot of people are going to enjoy, but just for me, as a person person who prefers an equal amount of action and character development, it did fall flat in some areas. So because that, I am going to give Extraction overall a C+. But over, guys, in my review of Extraction, let me know what you guys saw this one overall, lift your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye. Moving on.